because that Justin he's gonna fight with me, but Paddy, if Paddy wins, he's gonna try to avoid me and trying not to fight me because he's not man like.
There's a difference between having a meritocracy in sports and trying to make justifications for making the fights that are going to be most profitable for the business. Does that make sense? Because, I think, when you have this star and all these people that love tuning in for Paddy Pimblett fights, I'm not trying to necessarily agree with Arman that the UFC wants Paddy to be the champion of the division. I just think they want Paddy to be interesting enough to continue making fights that are going to make them money. And I think there's a slight difference with that. And I think that, I think they took the threat of Gaethje retiring as a serious one if he wasn't going to fight for some kind of a.
The final outcome is already vibrating with a sense of impending disaster because the confirmation we just received doesn't just move the needle. It detonates a lightweight division in real time. Tonight, careers are being flipped upside down, legacies are being gambled without the owner's consent, and someone is destined to leave the octagon exposed for the world to see, their mystique stripped away forever. We are currently experiencing a violent snap backward in the narrative because to truly grasp the gravity of this moment, you have to understand how a single, ill-timed injury managed to turn into Dana White greenlighting a collision course between Arman Tsarukyan and Paddy Pimblett. It is a matchup that feels less like a sanctioned sporting event and more like a high-stakes stress test for the UFC's honesty, its courage, and its ultimate control over the stories it tells us.
Gaethje's a big star, so is Paddy Pimblett. Are those the two best guys that should get the next shot against Topuria? Probably not. Arman is clearly, I think, the best fighter who isn't the champ in that division. But I think that obviously he has an issue with maybe people not caring as much about his fights as other people. So I think that's the issue. I don't believe it's because of the headbutt. It was like he got injured and didn't fight in the last one. Then the next excuse was the headbutt. I don't buy those as excuses. I think they're trying to make justifications for Paddy Pimblett or Gaethje, because they are bigger names than Arman. They want to give one of those guys the shot. I think that's what that is. And I think Paddy and Gaethje should be competitive. I don't think Arman versus either of those guys would be competitive. I think
it's the kind of news that makes you pause and think that this simply cannot be real. And yet, if you blink, you're going to miss exactly who is being positioned to benefit and who is being led to the altar to be sacrificed for the sake of the bottom line. There was a moment where Arman spoke with a chilling level of clarity, noting that while someone like Justin Gaethje is always willing to step into fire and fight him, someone like Paddy would do everything in his power to avoid that shadow. Arman wasn't just talking trash. He was laying out the blueprint of a man who sees the gears turning behind the curtain. He suggested that if Paddy wins, the evasion tactics begin because, in Arman's eyes, the liver-puddling lacks the specific brand of warrior spirit that defines a man like Gaethje. What we are witnessing right now isn't standard matchmaking. It is damage control masterfully disguised as a golden opportunity. The second Justin Gaethje went down with an injury, the UFC machine didn't grind to a halt. They didn't take a breath to reassess the landscape or wait for the dust to settle. Instead,
in this title, so we have an interim title shot. But I think we still got a really, really fun, exciting fight. Justin Gaethje is as exciting of a fighter as you're ever going to find. And Paddy Pimblett is, I don't know that he gets enough credit for his kind of all gas, no brakes style. I think at this point, I think Paddy has done a pretty good job of quieting a lot of the critics, myself included. I think after the Jared Gordon fight, I think people believed maybe we'd seen the ceiling for Paddy, and that's about as good as he was going to.
They move with a frantic, calculated energy to shove Arman and Paddy into the same orbit and lock the door behind them. That level of urgency tells a story of its own. It tells me that someone in the high offices panicked. Someone needed movement, and they needed it fast, because they couldn't afford the questions that would inevitably arise if Arman was forced to sit on the sidelines and wait any longer. You have to ask yourself why this moved at such a breakneck speed. There's a fundamental friction between maintaining a true meritocracy in professional sports and making the strategic justifications necessary to produce the fights that are most profitable for the business. When you have a star like Paddy Pimblett, a man who commands the attention of millions and brings a unique, chaotic energy to every fight week, the UFC's priority shifts. It's not necessarily that they want Paddy to be the champion of the world. It's that they desperately need him to remain interesting enough to keep the revenue streams flowing. There's a subtle but massive difference there. At the same time, they clearly took the threat of a Gaethje retirement as a serious blow to their upcoming calendar. If Justin wasn't going to be fighting for some version of a gold belt in his next outing, the risk of losing one of the most exciting fighters in history to the quiet life of retirement was too great to ignore. Arman Tsarukyan didn't just predict this chaos. He effectively forced the UFC's hand. When he claimed that Justin would fight him while Paddy would run, it wasn't just a soundbite for a highlight reel. It was a warning shot fired directly at the promotion's integrity. Now, with Dana White confirming the shift in plans following the injury, it feels like the UFC is throwing its hands up and saying, "Fine, let's see what happens." But the risk inherent in this gamble is astronomical. If Arman is correct, then an entire multi-year promotional narrative about Paddy's rise to the top could collapse in a single night of grappling dominance. Conversely, if Arman is wrong or if he slips up, his own hard-earned leverage in the title conversation evaporates instantly, leaving him at the mercy of a company that has already shown a preference for bigger, louder names. Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett are undeniable stars, but are they the two best athletes to be vying for a shot against someone like Topuria? Probably not. From a purely technical standpoint, Arman is widely considered the best fighter in the division who doesn't currently have a belt wrapped around his waist. However, his struggle has always been the intangibles. The fact that, for whatever reason, the casual audience doesn't seem to carry the same level of emotional investment in his journey as they do with the baddie. We've heard the excuses before, like the supposed headbutt incident that allegedly stalled his progress. But those excuses feel hollow now. It wasn't the headbutt that kept him back. It was the search for a justification to keep the bigger names in the spotlight. They want to give a shot to the stars. But the reality of the sport is that you can only ignore the shark in the water for so long before it starts biting the boat. For Paddy's fans, this news sounds like the ultimate opportunity to silence the doubters once and for all. But for the fighters who actually understand the mechanics of the cage, this sounds like pure danger. This isn't a gradual climb up the rankings anymore. This is a straight elevator ride to the final judgment. Seeing Paddy smiling through the buildup doesn't offer any comfort. In fact, it's deeply alarming. History shows that when the UFC moves a fighter this quickly into a shark tank, they either know something about that fighter's hidden potential that we haven't seen yet, or they are desperately hiding a vulnerability they don't want exposed before they can milk the hype for one last payday. That thought should bother anyone who values the sport side of MMA. The business talk hasn't faded into the background. It has become the loudest thing in the room. Arman remains the least convenient elite contender the UFC has ever had to deal with. He is too good to be ignored, too durable to be broken easily, and too consistent to be dismissed. By pairing him with the most marketable lightning rod in the sport, the UFC has created a scenario where there are no clean endings. Either Paddy proves he is truly untouchable and a legitimate threat to the throne, or Arman proves that the UFC has been protecting their golden boy until they simply ran out of places to hide him. The injury to Gaethje acted as a pressure release valve. Keeping Arman idle any longer would have made the favoritism impossible to explain away with corporate jargon. Injuries don't just open doors for new contenders. They expose the raw intentions of the people making the decisions. The intention here is clear. Solve the Arman problem now, one way or another, before he grows even more teeth and starts consuming the entire division's credibility. Arman's desire to see Justin beat Paddy is rooted in a respect for the old guard, a respect for manhood of a fighter who doesn't play games. He knows that if Paddy wins, the path to a title shot becomes a maze of negotiations and wrong numbers. People keep saying this is a matter of good timing, but they're wrong.